My name is Mike Todd, and I'm second generation of the company Sargent Auto Upholstery. Back then it was called Sargent Auto Upholstery. So my dad bought the business from a man named Henry Sargent. Henry Sargent was retiring, and my dad at the time had just gotten out of the military. He was working a bunch of women at the IRS building downtown Bay Street. He hated it. He always wanted to own his own business. So he ended up, he and my mom every Saturday would look at the newspaper and they would try and find a business to buy. They didn't care what kind of business, it just had to be a business. It might have been a barber shop, it could have been a restaurant. Anyway, this business came up for sale. My dad struck a deal with the guy, Henry Sargent. Henry Sargent was retiring. So my dad ended up buying the business, a few assets, and I think 3 employees. This was back in the mid-50s.
Okay.
And so he ended up moving into a storefront right where the 4th and Main car wash is now. There was a strip mall, like a little set of stores that were connected. There was a donut shop, which I remember those donuts. And he would go next door and get donuts all the time. But he had a little small shop with basically, I think it was a showroom, a workshop area, and then a shed out back where they would work on the cars. So he had 3 employees. He had Charlie Lockwood, which was the manager. He's the one that taught my dad everything. He came from the old business to the new. And so Charlie knew it inside and out, taught my dad everything. I think he had a sewer that came along with him. And a 3rd person, I'm not sure who that was or what they did in the business. But anyway, they stayed there for probably a good 10 years, and they outgrew that place. This building apparently was available, and I understand it was an abandoned grocery store called People's Groceries.
And the address?
It's 44 East 1st Street is the address. So apparently he found this building, it was abandoned. Where I'm sitting right now was this wall didn't exist behind me. It was all one big room. This was a showroom where the groceries were displayed. Go down the hallway, there's a few bathrooms, and then back in the back was the meat counter and I guess the stock room where they would stock the groceries. And as far as I know, that was it. It was just a simple little grocery store. And so he immediately had to convert this into some sort of automotive shop. So the first edition was on the east side. And I remember that back then there was a big oak tree, and they had to cut down the oak tree. And I had a customer come in recently and said, I really missed that big oak tree you guys cut down because it must have been beautiful. People, I guess employees would tie their bikes up to it or something. And so anyway, so then he just kept expanding. As he kept growing, he kept expanding. So I guess the next expansion was to the south and then the west. We've probably expanded 3 or 4 times over the past 40 years or more. And this neighborhood was completely different back then. Directly across the street was a huge 3-story home. And I don't know the history on it. It's been leveled across the street on the far corner, catty corner from us. I understand was Alderman's home from Alderman Park neighborhood. I think that was their home. There again, I remember it being a 3-story home, just like the one with the Alki place is now. And so this whole neighborhood, just like the Barnett Mansion, was just full of huge 3-story homes. And so that it was a totally different scene because back then all the money was seat covers on the cars. People buy a brand new car, the first thing they would want to do is put clear plastic seat covers on their investment. So it's laughable now. No one ever does that. But back then, that's what they did. Everybody brought the brand new car in to have clear plastic seat covers or maybe some carpets replaced. Everything was simple. You had bench seats. You don't see bench seats anymore. Everyone had a bench seat basically. We might have done a headliner, covering armrest on the door, and just really basic, simple stuff. And as time changed, things got more and more complicated. basically what now we're doing is restoring cars. So let's say if you have a late model car and you've worn out the leather seat where you slide across to get in, we'll take that cover off, we'll open the stitching up and replace that in one section to keep it original. So we still do some restoration work on older cars when things were much more simple. We have people that have been around long enough, remember how it used to be done, so we still service those people. But I'd say our bread and butter now is really more restoration as far as repairing things, like maybe replacing a headliner that's fallen, or fixing a leather seat that's been damaged due to wear, or replacing carpet.
Did you work in the shop when?
That's a good question. I've got two sons that work here as well, and all of us have worked from the ground up. We started sweeping, and then just absorbing the business, every aspect of it. So before you know it, you can do most anything that the business entails. I do not sew, but that's one thing I wish I had picked up years ago. But my son Sean, my oldest son, does sew, so.
How old were you when, did you work as a boy when your dad first bought the business?
I had no choice. So it was either, especially in high school, if I get out of high school, we were in double sessions at Terry Berger at the time in the 70s. So I was the first session. So we would get out at noon. All my friends went surfing. But I had to call in. I had to go home, call in, see if we were busy enough, if he needed me or not. So many times I would come straight from home out of school and come down here and work after school, and then of course all of the summers were spent down here. And we've had some really interesting employees over the years. In fact, I'm compiling a list of all the employees. I've got a list a mile long. Every once in a while I'll think of a new person that I hadn't thought of before. And it's a challenge because some of these people, as you know, can be real characters, and so I've started doing that here recently. But yes, we did work. I had to do all phases of it. In fact, interesting story, my grandfather also worked here. They had a boarding home at 6th and Liberty, 6th and Laura, right behind where Main 6th is now. So they had a boarding home there. They had about 4 apartments, I think, that rented out. And then my grandfather would work here during the day, just for something to do. And I worked alongside my grandfather for many years. He taught me so many little things about different aspects of upholstery work. And he was a big inventor. He invented tools that we'd use to help increase our efficiency. But I remember one day, back then seats were heavy, and they were mostly bench seats. And we would unbolt the seat, and one guy had to crawl through the car to get the seat out of the car. And a lot of times my grandfather would be the one to actually crawl through the car. And one day, I'll never forget, he says, "Mike, would you mind crawling through this time?" I thought, I can't believe that he's actually an old man, and I should be doing that. So he worked here till, I guess he got too old to work anymore. So.
How long did your grandparents live in Springfield?
I think the neighborhood at the time was getting pretty rough, and so this must have been the late 70s, I'm thinking. And so my parents had been moved over to one of the towers right downtown. And then from there they moved to Arlington to be near my parents. But I never actually lived in Springfield. So I lived in Arlington near the Matthews Bridge in that neighborhood. And so we would commute back and forth. This is back when they had the toll roads across the Matthews Bridge, and had coupon tickets where we would actually tear off a coupon and give it to them, save a few bucks. But back then, the majority of our business was used car lots. And we hardly do any used car lots anymore, but back then, we serviced used car lots. They expected us to go out, pick up the cars, and do whatever the car needed, and then deliver them back. Half the time you get to the car lot, there's no gas, there's no tag, it's boxed in by another car, dead battery, and I can't tell you how many times I've run out of gas. going from here to say Kansas Avenue or Phillips Highway, especially Kansas Avenue. And but Main Street back then was like used car road. So there was every mom and pop little used car lot you could dream of, wall to wall. I could go on, I could probably name 20 of them right off the top of my head.
And this was along Main Street from
From closer down to downtown, there was a place called Mid-City Chrysler Plymouth that took up the whole block. And then starting there, like State and Union, you started getting all the little small used car lots. And so it just, that's what we did. We just went out and picked up the cars. And Tillman Auto Sales was directly behind us, but that was fast. And so just a lot of fun memories of how things used to be. Back in the, I guess, 60s, we had a second shop my uncle ran across the street from Baptist Hospital. Now it's a place called Sherwood's. It's a bar. It's been Sherwood's for quite some time. But back then, it was a building that we made into an automotive upholstery shop. My uncle ran that for maybe 10 years, and then they eventually shut that down. It wasn't efficient. Then he, in turn, after closing that, he moved into one of our shops back in the back, and he and his wife, my aunt, did furniture. So all they did was furniture, and we did the automotive upholstery around that. Back in the, I guess, 40s, 50s, early 60s, we were surrounded by homes, little homes, like little shotgun homes, up to Main Street. They were wrapped all the way around down Newman Street. And so eventually they got displaced as developers came in. My dad bought a few, knocked them down to expand them into. An optical company ended up building next door to us, to the south. That eventually became my brother's place. But basically it was just a lot of low income housing all around us right through here. And I remember across the street where Mary Singleton Senior Citizen Center is, that was a neighborhood of just low-end housing. For fun, in high school, we would get in a car and drive through those neighborhoods in the dark, and it was so scary. We were just on the edge of our seats. We were crazy. We could have got killed or whatever, but it was a rough neighborhood, and we would just drive through those neighborhoods real slow, looking around when our eyes had been around, and so it was a pretty sketchy neighborhood back then. And like we say, eventually, either things got torn down or they got renovated. And unfortunately, they tore down some beautiful homes, like directly across over here and across the street where the old ones were. I don't know whose home this was. And the Barnett bench is still here, thank goodness. So,
were the homes torn down because they became dangerous?
That's a good question. I don't know if they were just too bad condition to restore. People didn't see the need in it. Back then, people did see the value in history. Now it's a historic neighborhood. Back then, it wasn't a historic neighborhood. That's where you get infill housing. They let anything get built that if you had a few bucks, you wanted to build a house, they didn't care what it was. It could be a little brick. You see them all through Springfield. And now you can do that because the Springfield preservation is more on top of things, and you have to have it approved. Back in the 60s, they were just thankful to have anything being built, I guess. They didn't care what it was. So a lot of the homes you see that are scattered throughout Springfield look out of character because they're not that old. They were just built as infill. And so it's too bad. But in where those homes were, at one time, it's probably a very, very nice home. Either burned down or got knocked over.
You said your grandparents had a boarding house over on Laura Street. Do you remember any stories about their boarding house?
Here's an interesting story. It's on my list, and I almost forgot to mention it too. We would have to store cars at night. Our building holds just so many cars. Cars were bigger back then. So we would actually drive cars down to my grandparents' alley, park it behind their house in the alley. And they would give my keys to my grandfather and my grandparents, And then the next morning, we drive down there, knock on the door, break them up, get the keys, drive back to the shop. Can you imagine doing that now? I thought that was really cool. People just didn't have a hard time believing we actually did that.
Mhm.
But we did that for years. And I remember down Main Street, between 8th Street and probably 5th Street, was just solid bars. I mean, literally, not just what we think of as bars today, rough bars, including the one on the corner right here that we're restoring now, Brick and Beam, used to be I think it was called Main Street Liquors. And I was scared to death of that place. I mean, it had a reputation, and I heard people get killed in there quite often, and so I never set foot in that place until it became approved. But there was a story one day I was delivering a car. I was on Main, right at a stuck in a traffic light, and to the right was a bar called the Joker's Wild. And two ladies were having, I call them ladies, they were having a fight, fist fight on the sidewalk. And I swear, I think we sat there through 3 traffic lights watching this fight, because they got very violent and creative. They were grabbing each other's hair, they were on the sidewalk, rolling around. One of the tops came off, and it was a pretty interesting sight. So that was Springfield back then. I mean, that's why I had to pinch myself sometimes to realize that, first of all, my house is the same house that I bought, because it's beautiful now. Back then, it was ghetto, and then just how much things have changed. I mean, we're seeing more and more things, people interested in the neighborhood. I saw Kelly Rich last night at the concert, and by the way, we have a concert every second Wednesday, I think. Saw you there last night.
Yes, I do. Yeah.
And so one of my friends has a car lot. I have a band. I'm in a band, and we've had the same 3 guys in my band, often on 3 or 4 guys, but 3 core guys for the past 40 years. We used to practice here. We're called the Vinyl. It's all original music, but now we've been displaced from here, because there's no more room for us, to my friend's car lot over here on 3rd Main. He's recently sold that. I think he sold it. It's vacant property now, but they still let us keep our stuff there. And so we have a little studio we can practice in, but
Are you still called the Vinyl Man?
we're still called the Vinyl Man. Yeah. Oh, I was talking to Kelly, got sidetracked. And she was asking Les about his property on Main Street, because there are a lot of people interested in buying property on Main Street, which is music to my ears. I think that's just refreshing. Couldn't have said that 5 years ago, maybe 2 or 3 years ago. So things are really changing. What they've done over here with this building in the corner, Brick and Beam, it's not finished yet, but you can tell it's going to be something nice. You know, there are actually new car dealerships as well, not just used car lots. There was, where the Earl Horn building was in the corner, the roof is collapsed now, right there on the corner of 1st and Main. Now it's vacant. It's owned by Petra.
Mhm.
That was downtown Oslo. And I remember vaguely delivering cars to them, driving up a ramp, and driving the cars up on the 2nd level, and I can't figure out how that happened. But I know for a fact that there was a 2nd level at that time. Maybe it's been torn down since then, but that was a new car dealership. There were new car dealerships scattered all through there. Everything was downtown. All the shopping was downtown. And if you went shopping, you went to the core downtown area, to Make Homes, Ivy's, Fritz Goods. We would take buses. Our parents didn't have a care in the world. We would take a bus from Arlington, where I grew up, and we'd just get off and roam the downtown streets. And we would just, for all afternoon, take the bus back home. Parents never asked where we were, never cared.
When did that change? That kind of like feeling of, because you said like later
This
on you were
was-
driving through and.
I was in junior high school, I was too young to drive,
Mhm.
so that had to have been in the 60s. So things were just so different back then. Just no crime, I mean, downtown crime. All the department stores were downtown. There was no, Regency got built probably in the late sixties, early seventies, so there's no shopping malls, all shopping was downtown. So, which is really cool. That character right there is me, and we're guessing that was probably in the mid-50s. I was born in 52, so some of the mid-50s footage there. This will show you some of the pricing of seat covers. Plastic seat covers, $15.95, and that's some people may not know it, but that's a Volkswagen. I know it because I just know what Volkswagens look like. And then this is something called a mod top. That was kind of a craze back in the early 60s. That's probably from the body line. That's a 64 Mustang with a mod top on it. Here's Duval Ford, Duval Motors. That was downtown. Here's the bathroom walls that were covered in plaster. To me, there's nothing better than brick walls. See this floor? That's at least 100 years old. And this building where we are right now is some of the original plaster, and this was an original wall here. But this is where a lot of the cutting and sewing is done, and we're getting more and more commercial accounts. Like the yellow stuff that you see is we're doing that for Vistacon, where they have these chutes, I guess, where they're getting scrap plastic, and they're trying to contain it and put it into bins, so we're making special chutes to contain the plastic. And just, you never know what's going to come in here. We're doing a lot of work now for the Florida Air National Guard. We're doing covers, all sorts of little covers for aircraft. We are doing just into all the different crazy things that people ask you to do. Our newest edition is called a long arm machine, and we're trying to pursue more industrial work where like PRI brings tents to us, huge tents, get all that material under the sewing machine, and things like that. Supports the Jaguar facility. They bring stuff into us. For example, tents at the northern end zone, they were always tearing up the storms. PRI brings in tents. So this machine gives you the capability of getting a large piece of material. You can now work on large volumes of material. In the past, we were very, very restricted. So that is originally, it was a hardtop car. It was converted into a convertible by a company called American Sunroof Corporation, who's been out of business for many years. So you can't find parts for them. You can't find a top for it. So we're having to scour the country trying to find parts for it and to get a top to fit it. And it's been here about a half a year. I want to see it go. There's maybe one other, I would call them, maybe two other legitimate competitors. And we've all got the same problem. We can't find help because we're such a niche industry that you just can't put an ad in the paper. It's a waste of money and time. You just have to. We've had really good luck training people. We have a guy, he's off today, but we trained one. He'd never seen a sewing machine. He said, "Are you willing to learn?" He said, "Sure, I'm willing." So within a month, he was up and running, and actually pretty quick. Once you sit down, you got a good teacher, and you got a will to learn. You got have a decent skill. This is a 1950 English Ford. It's called a Prefect, and we actually own two of these. And the other one, I've yet to drive. We've had it for like 5 years, and it's still in the shop being repaired. So can't wait till we get that car back. But this is how you open the hood.
That's awesome.
It's got 10 horsepower.
10 holes.
The only thing that we put this on here, but the only thing that says Ford anywhere on the car is right there. That's where the toolbox is. And this is the hand crank to crank it if you ever have a dead battery.